The Loss and Damage Fund, meant to look after the planet's poorest, particularly when climate disasters strike.
Obligation to fund our collective survival.
But the fight over who pays and how much still drags on. Meanwhile, in Bolivia, a full-blown brawl breaks out over the government's lithium deal with a Russian company. And then there's this.
The fact that the most successful animals that probably have ever lived disappeared almost in a blink of an eye.
We're all obsessed with dinosaurs, but is there a warning in their extinction? And should we really be thinking about bringing them back?
I don't think it's a good idea from a number of reasons.
Still, the science behind it is wild. Just 2 degrees is on. Now.
The fun of it is to doing what I think we've tried to do on this project.
There is just something about dinosaurs, right? I mean, just the idea of these massive creatures roaming the earth, it grabs us. Well, that's what the Apple TV Plus series Prehistoric Planet is all about.
This is Prehistoric Planet. There are many ways to describe life on this planet. Some creatures could be called magnificent, or monstrous. Perhaps misunderstood. But only a few creatures who roam this earth could be called all three.
I reached out to the show's executive producer, Gunton, to talk about these stunning visuals and exactly what might happen if dinosaurs were actually resurrected. Mike, it's good to see you. Watching Prehistoric Planet makes you realize how life thrived, well, until it didn't. And obviously, the dinosaurs didn't cause their own extinction, but do you think there's a lesson in how quickly everything can collapse when the planet's balance gets thrown off?
Well, yes, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, this was a pretty catastrophic event. As we understand it, no one knows for sure exactly what happened, but it does. All the evidence suggests that it was this one massive catastrophic event that caused this ripple across the planet. But yes, I mean, the fact that the most successful animals that probably have ever lived had, been dominating the planet for 170 odd million years, disappeared almost in a blink of an eye. Yeah, it's a very salutary lesson about how fragile even the most powerful life is when Mother Nature or the forces of nature turn against you. Definitely.
One thing the series reminds me of is that Earth's probably going to be fine. It always finds a way back. I guess the question is whether we will. Is that a thought you wanted people to leave the show with?
The opposite. We're saying actually life is connected. We're all connected. So these animals lived 65 million years ago. We live today, but the same challenges and the same issues and the same solutions to life's challenges you can see across those times. So life has this wonderful connection. Doesn't matter how far back in time you go, we all have this connection. We're all part of the same story. And I think what you're saying about that's underpinned by planet Earth, Mother Nature, and whatever happens so far, and maybe until eventually the sun disappears, as long as the sun keeps shining. But fundamentally, the planet will continue to be here, and life in some way will find a way to survive. Now, it may be the dinosaurs didn't have their day. We will have our day, but the planet will continue. And so there is, yes. So part of our story is we're saying there is this connection. We are there. We're as much like them as and they're like us and we're like them. You sort of mean. There's lots of connections.
It took so much creativity and tech to bring these creatures to life. You think we need the same kind of energy and imagination to actually tackle the climate crisis?
Yeah, I mean, people have been asking me about, should we bring dinosaurs back to life? Should we be doing genetic engineering and all the rest of it to try and create a T-Rex? And yeah, I mean, it's quite an interesting thing to do. But sort of extrapolating what you're saying, I would have said we should probably be putting more effort into using those skills and those resources to sort out some of the other problems that we face on planet Earth today.
There's this big fascination with the idea of bringing dinosaurs back. But from an environmental perspective, do you think that's a good idea?
So I think we should leave them where they are back in the past. But the fun of it is to doing what I think we've tried to do on this project, is to reimagine them and use the things that I've spent my career doing, the techniques of wildlife filmmaking to recreate that experience. What would it have been like if we could have got into a time machine and flown back 65 million years with all the crews and all the cameras and all the stuff we use to make planet Earth, and then film those animals in the same way, so that you get as close as you possibly can to experiencing what their lives were like. And that's important because I want people to think they're amazing animals rather than they're monsters. I mean, there's a little frisson of excitement because they are powerful and scary, and some of them are very scary, but they're also living. They're trying to look after their babies, they're trying to find a mate, they're trying to find a home, all the things that we do. They live by the same rules as a lion does, or an elephant does, or indeed as actually we do fundamentally. Survival, looking after the next generation, finding something to eat, all the life challenges that are universal. Those are the stories we're taking. But they're also very dramatic and very emotional. When there's a sequence where a giant dinosaur, 75 years old, effectively a great granddad, has had this huge success had all these offspring, and they're with him, but his life's coming to an end. And and that night he falls to the ground and his life is over. But he's been a success. His life has been a success. He's created all these offspring. But we use that then to talk about our connection to those times by then going into a story about how he, or that individual, becomes a fossil. It's an almost miraculous thing, 1 in a billion chance that happens, but it does happen. And we do a sort of high speed, almost like a time lapse of that moment to when, in today's world, somebody digs the fossil up, and there we are. We have a life we can recreate. And what that does is it says we have this connection back. There's a line that connects today's world with that world, and also it reminds us that life on Earth has been around a long time.
So while some people are trying to figure out the ramifications of bringing these prehistoric creatures back to life, others are begging just to survive the present. In mid-July, climate vulnerable nations met in the Philippines to discuss the very important Loss and Damage Fund, which was created to help those hit hard by environmental disasters. Well, the fund was created in 2022, but only began operating this year. But the money is barely trickling in, so campaigners launched a global push in mid-July to demand that wealthy nations stop dragging their feet and pay up for all this damage that's already been done. I called up Brandon Wu at ActionAid USA. He was at the Philippines meetings, but when we last spoke, Brandon said it seemed like wealthy nations may want to uphold the current global economic status quo.
Citing a study from actually 2015, 10 years ago, the net financial flows between the global north and the global south were $2 trillion every year flowing from the south to the north, right? So in the wrong direction. If you look at debt service, if you look at illicit financial flows, which includes sort of some of the corporate tax avoidance practices, $2 trillion flowing in the wrong direction. And so yes, much of the developed world wants to uphold that system, right? And when we're talking about climate finance, it's a good way to put into perspective the numbers that we're talking here. $1 trillion a year in grants in climate finance. If you compare that to the net outflows from the south that are being extracted by the north, it really puts it into perspective. So yes, I think the global north governments want their companies to succeed, right? They want to count certain kinds of finance, even beyond loans. They want to count things like export credits. What are export credits? That's subsidies to northern corporations to do business in the global south. And they want to say that that's climate finance. So yes, they want to prop up an existing system that is absolutely unjust and unfair.
Yeah, and maybe to just come back to your question about I think you asked about if there's also like a racism in the way that finance is now flowing. I think there's definitely, you can see a form of white saviorism in how climate finance is seen as some sort of like aid or charity. So when, you know, developed countries give a few billion in grants, it's seen as like some amazing, you know, gracious gift that they're giving, instead of actually this debt that they owe to the global south. And to then give climate finance in the form of loans, it's just really nasty, actually, because it's not helpful at all, and it's not paying back the climate debt.
Brandon, it's really good to see you again. It's good to have you back. Since we last spoke, has anything positive happened? Are countries getting financial help now to rebuild and recover after climate disasters?
So no, there hasn't been any money that's actually flowed through that fund yet. We're still, I'm here. We just wrapped up the 6th board meeting of the fund, and they've taken some policy decisions to move things forward. But it looks like we're not going to get actual money flowing until early next year, probably.
So you posted this graph on your social media that seems to show how the fund for responding to loss and damage will evolve, I guess. You said, quote, some consultants were probably paid an obscene amount of money to produce this absolutely nonsensical graph, and that a document you read there was, quote, full of empty buzzwords and BS, and that it pisses you off. It definitely sounds like another waste of time set of meetings.
The bigger problem is actually goes beyond the board and the policies that they're setting. The policies here are, what is the fund going to support and how is it going to do that, basically? But there's a bigger problem, which is, where is the money? So at this point, countries have pledged just over $700 million to the fund. Now, when you think about what this fund is supposed to do, which is support countries that have been hit with major natural disasters, you think about a single disaster, like, say, the floods in Pakistan in 2022. Those are estimated to cost about $30 billion in losses and damages. And now we're talking about a fund that right now has less than 1 billion, significantly less than $1 billion. And so the scale is not there. And that's actually one of the main things that's making it difficult to design the kind of fund that we need.
So a new Fill the Fund report lays out how developing countries could face $400 billion in climate damage in 2025 alone. Yet the fund that's supposed to help them supposedly only has about $350 million in it. What does that say about the moral priorities of the global system we're in?
Well, I think that's pretty clear, which is that developed countries, so the rich countries, are the ones who have the obligation to contribute to this fund, and they're not making it a priority. It's quite clear. They're cutting aid budgets across the board. They're increasing military spending. In my country, the United States alone, we just passed a budget that would spend $200 billion in fiscal year 2025 alone on border security and immigration enforcement. So this is money that's going to be spent to actively make people's lives worse. And it is more than 11,000 times the amount of money that the US has put into the Loss and Damage Fund, which is meant to save people's lives and livelihoods.
Lastly, Brandon, the last time we spoke, you said racism, capitalism, and this need for the global north to maintain its status quo as it is economically is what's behind all these delays and hoops that you talk about. Can you give me the clearest example that you've seen or heard of those delays that are driven by racism, driven by capitalism, driven by the need to maintain the economic status quo at the meetings that you've been to?
I think there's pretty clear evidence that at least for some governments and for some people in the global north, there is a fundamental problem of racism. But I do think that also many people in the global north, in the United States, are fundamentally empathetic, fundamentally generous in many ways. Foreign assistance polls quite well, including in the United States, where our government has just axed all foreign assistance altogether. But generally, if we make the argument for why this is important, both on a moral and a practical grounds, people are open to it. It's just that our governments, our people in power, they're the ones who are, putting forward this really callous, really harmful, really selfish agenda.
Let's take a moment for a Just to Matter, our segment about the small things that make a big impact. This time we're talking about heat. It's uncomfortable at times, but zoom out and the impact on the world around us is a lot more serious than you might think. Ever walked barefoot on hot asphalt? Now imagine doing it with pores. At 35 degrees Celsius air temperature, pavements can hit 60 degrees. That's hot enough to burn your dog's feet in seconds.
Il bouge beaucoup. Et comme c'est un grand chien, effectivement, il a un peu du mal à supporter la chaleur. Donc c'est assez rapide les balades, quoi. On va dire qu'au bout d'un moment, au bout d'une demi-heure, c'est bon, il est déjà crevé.
Bees stop flying above 40 degrees. Worms burrow deeper. And ants can't handle extreme surface heat for long. The hotter it gets, the harder it is for tiny creatures to regulate their body temperature, or even find food. And the heat does a lot more than make us sweat. It spoils our milk quicker, kills our batteries faster, and power grids sag under the weight of air conditioners that are running 24/7. Scientists in Australia even saw parrots falling from trees during heat waves. Not because they were sick, but because it was too hot, even in the shade. It's easy to miss these things until they start breaking down. And when the smallest parts of the system go, the rest doesn't keep going for long. But as poorer countries try to get richer nations to pay up, others are harnessing the kind of power that could help prevent more carnage in the future. But not all climate solutions are land-based. Some are hiding just beneath the surface, quietly making waves.
There's a relatively unknown source of clean power, one that's quietly making waves. It's called tidal energy. There's enough energy in ocean tides and currents to power every home in the US twice over, according to marine experts. And unlike solar or wind, tides aren't at the mercy of the weather, but influenced by gravity from the sun and moon.
You know exactly, to 6 seconds of exactitude, what amount of power you're going to make on any given day at any given time.
But tidal technology is still new and expensive. It powers fewer than 400,000 homes worldwide and is only available in countries like South Korea, France, and Canada. France, for one, is home to the first commercial tidal power station, the La Rance Barrage. It was built back in 1966 and costs around $1 billion in today's money. 6 decades later, the turbines still spin and produce enough power for about 250,000 people. So how does tidal energy work? Turbines are placed deep underwater in spots where ocean currents naturally flow fast, like narrow channels or around islands. As the water rushes past, it spins the blades and that motion creates power. But as promising as this is, it doesn't come without some risks. The turbines can seriously harm marine animals if they get too close. But some projects have found ways to ride the tide with less disruption to underwater ecosystems. The Reagan, off the coast of Scotland, uses smaller turbines and claims to allow marine life to pass safely around or over them. One of its turbines has even been spinning underwater for over 6 straight years. More of that now.
Hi, Thomas. So why is the 6.5-year continuous operation of a tidal turbine considered a breakthrough for the marine energy industry?
It's a very challenging environment to operate a machine underwater for that period of length time in a reliable way. So it's a way to also show to the world and to all interested parties that we have come to a point now where this is another interesting brick, so to say, in the total energy mix to produce reliable energy.
So 4 turbines produce a combined 6 megawatts, which is enough energy for 7,000 homes. How scalable is this, considering how expensive and difficult tidal energy is to maintain?
We are at the point where this technology can be scaled up, and what we will see in the years to come here until 2030, there will be a number of sort of installations where taking up more to an industrial scale production, and I think we will see in the 2030 to 2040 timeframe that this technology can scale further and become, not the biggest part of the total energy mix, but a significant part.
Are there significant challenges to overcome before tidal power becomes widely adopted?
The first projects we are working on here is the ones in Scotland. There is also one project in France. And of course, the interesting thing with tidal, if you compare to many other renewable energy sources, is that it's predictive. That means that if you have a turbine with a capacity of, let's say, 1.5 megawatt, it will produce 1.5 megawatts because the tide is constant. With wind, it's required that you have wind that is blowing, or with solar that the sun is shining. But tidal, basically, the yield you get is predictive, so to say, is known. So this is also quite interesting in terms of providing a steady, constant source of energy into the grid, because very often when you have renewable sources, you get problems with so-called grid stabilization. And here you can get a significant load, so to say, on the grid to provide that stability. Quite some additional investment will be required to support that growth. But right now we are focusing on the 2030 timeframe and the projects we have in front of us now.
And how critical was SKF's technology to the achievement?
It's a rotating machine, and this is what SKF does. We are the world leader in bearings, and of course bearings is about rotation, but this is more than bearings. It's actually, we have been working here very, very closely with the turbine developers to make sure holistically that we have a system which works.
Thomas, SKF helps power some of the dirtiest industries by providing bearings, seals, lubrication systems to the mining, cement, and petrochemical industries. But now that you're enabling one of the cleanest, what does SKF's future look like? Where exactly are your loyalties?
No, but I think we have, first of all, as a company, we have a very strong commitment to the sustainability agenda. We have, as a company, committed to being net zero in our own operation by 2030. So basically having no emissions, and including scope 3, we are talking about 2050, is also our supply base. But of course, being a bearing company in our core, it means working towards reducing friction. And here we have a lot of initiatives in terms of how to, support our customers and their applications to become more energy efficient.
Before I leave you, this is what happened in Bolivia in mid-July. What you're looking at is lawmakers in the country's lower chamber arguing over the status of a lithium contract. In a nutshell, the Bolivian government wants foreign investment from Russian and Chinese firms to unlock one of the world's biggest lithium reserves. But locals are demanding to know how this would benefit them and protect ecosystems there. They've gotten a court to suspend the contracts pending proper public consultations. Now, should there be concern? Yeah. Lithium is the magic ingredient in the batteries you find in electric vehicles, solar panel storage systems, as well as everyday necessities like laptops and phones. But extracting lithium depletes water that local communities and wildlife depend on. Processing ore can release sulfur oxide and other pollutants.
El arcismo, en su desesperación, como viene intentando aprobar un contrato que no es favorable al pueblo boliviano, que más pareciera a un negociado de la familia de Arce Catacora, el presidente de Bolivia, y su entorno político, insiste en querer firmar un contrato que no es favorable para los intereses del país, y no lo vamos a permitir. Y es por eso que hoy estamos enfrascados en esta bochornosa sesión, porque no estamos dispuestos a regalar los recursos naturales de Bolivia.
And that's our show. I'll leave you with images from a pretty hot construction site in Tokyo, Japan, where temperatures rose above 35 degrees Celsius when this was filmed. But take a look at what the guys are wearing. It looks like they're suited for some harsh winter weather, but look closer and you'll notice these aren't regular jackets. They're equipped using thermoelectric technology and cooling fans to keep everyone from overheating. It's a great idea too because construction workers are at high risk of heat stroke on the job. Well, a lot more than many of us. See you next time. Bye.
昔はこういう空調ジャンバーとかそういうものは着ることもなかったですし、そんな特別こう今みたいになんか倒れたりとかそういうのも少なかったと思うんですけど、最近ここ何年間はやっぱりこういう空調ジャンバーとかそういうのが必要になってきて、やっぱりそれだけ相当暑いんだなとは思います。